Thankful to have all of you here today. My name is Christy and this is my husband Garrett. Today I am facing my biggest fear of speaking in public because I feel that the topic of geoengineering is too important to let fear keep me from speaking about it to others. I am a mother and a homemaker. I am a mother of a child who is being personally affected by these programs as well as being affected by them myself. I have no agenda here other than sharing with you information that I find to be incredibly terrifying, to be honest, and I truly believe that geoengineering, or more controversially known as chemtrails, is the most serious thing we face as a species today. The documentary you're about to watch is called Look Up. It is an introductory video on the topic of, on this topic, mainly aimed at those who are brand new to this information. There is an app associated with this video for smartphones that will send pictures directly to your representatives. I am not here to promote the app or suggest you buy it, but if you choose, it can be another tool that is utilized. To be honest, I don't know much about the app. I don't have a smartphone, so I've never used it and I cannot speak to its efficacy. However, this documentary is good for introducing people to this topic, which is why I chose it. Also, I'm excited to tell you that after the viewing of this video, which is only about a half hour long, we will be having Dane Wigington on speakerphone for a Q&A session. Dane is the lead researcher for Geoengineeringwatch.org and has been researching this topic for well over a decade. Much of the documentation, patents, and lab tests I have provided on disc over here on this table have come from his website. He is also one of the people interviewed on the documentary we are about to watch. I am very honored and excited to have him participating in this with us today. For those of you who are new to the topic of geoengineering, let me give you a brief summary of what it is. Geoengineering, or aka chemtrails, is the dumping of millions of tons of heavy metal nanoparticulates into the atmosphere by airplanes. Biological contaminants, as well as unidentifiable polymer fibers, have also been found in the fallout of this spray. It is being reported all over the world, especially in the NATO countries. I don't want to stand up here and try to convince you of anything on my word alone, and to be quite frank, it is not my responsibility to convince you. Even with as much as I've researched, I feel ill-equipped to present on such a topic as this to an audience. Today, I offer you information, documentation, and my interpretation of this evidence only. It is up to each of you to do the research to convince yourselves. I've provided a wealth of documentation on these discs right over here on this table that you're all welcome to take. They're all free. Please help yourself. To get you started if you choose. If you look with an open mind, what you are sure to find will most likely be very upsetting. Please do not let that deter you from investigating further. I don't claim to have all the answers to the who, the what, or the why of this phenomenon. I do, however, know with unwavering certainty that these geoengineering programs are occurring and that we all are being affected at some level. I have come to that conclusion through years' worth of researching and doing my own rainwater sample testing, and there isn't a single person on the face of this planet who can convince me that this wasn't happening. I also believe that the tree death and plant death and disease we are sadly witnessing here in the gorge area are due to these programs. Unfortunately, we are not isolated when it comes to tree death. If you look into this aspect further, you will find that trees across the U.S. and the globe are in serious decline. I do not argue that bugs aren't playing their part, but bugs are only an effect. Ask anyone who's made a study of nature their passion. Bugs and disease come in when the system is stressed. We need to start asking, why are the trees and plants stressed? I am convinced that these programs are the cause. On the table over there, I have provided the documentary we are going to watch today on disc for any of you who would be interested in taking one home and sharing it. There are also discs on that table that have pictures I have taken, documents, sample analysis, patents, and other supporting evidence of the existence of these programs for anyone who would like to pursue this information further. I have also provided a few print materials of my own personal rainwater sample analysis that corroborates what seems to be the signature fallout for those that would like to have them. The color flyers are Dane's generous contribution to my efforts. The documents and videos on these discs can answer the question contrail versus chemtrail. It has numerous patents that show the what and the how. And there are several military documents discussing weather modification as far back as the 60s and the military's goal of controlling the weather by 2025, which is referenced in the documentary we are about to watch. I would argue that they've already accomplished their goal or are close to it. The implications of this information is daunting and can be overwhelming at first. I absolutely agree. But do not let that arrest you from taking it further or causing you to disbelieve without disproving because of how uncomfortable it can make you feel. I believe that the only way we can hope to stop these programs is by reaching critical mass and awareness of them, and for all of our voices to be speaking out against them. We all need to be the change we wish to see in the world now, and the change I wish to see is a viable future for my son, and with the trajectory we are on, a healthy and vibrant planet is just not possible. Lastly, I would like to leave you with something that can be done about this. Instead of feeling like victims or feeling helpless or powerless to do anything about what is occurring, I believe it is time for each and every one of us who is aware of what is happening to step into courage and to step into creative ideas and action. I don't have the magic bullet or the right answers for what everyone can do. All I have is suggestions and the ideas that I have employed. I will share these with you in hopes to spark ideas of what you as an individual can do towards addressing this problem. For too long, I have felt alone in my efforts, and today I am asking you out of all sincerity to please step up and help me by caring enough to do something about this. This information is useless if the action is not taken towards bringing these programs to an end. Okay. I'm glad you're here. Thank you. So what I suggest is taking samples and having them analyzed by a lab. Blood, soil, tree bark, rainwater, pond water, well water, whatever other biological samples we can have analyzed for the presence of these contaminants. I've provided a list of labs on the documents disc over there that can be utilized for this purpose. We spend countless amounts of money on things we don't need or things to distract us from reality. Why not put that money towards building upon the evidence already gathered? Why not spend the money to convince yourself of the reality of these programs, at the same time adding to the credibility and relevance of concern over these programs? Call, email, or write to your representatives, whether they be local, state, or federal, and demand answers. Contact your local newspapers or radio stations and ask them to investigate this phenomena unbiasedly. Tell the people that are running for public office right now that they will not get your vote unless they address geoengineering publicly and honestly. Call the local police station and file a report on the days that are heavy, like today. Talk to your friends and family, but most importantly, talk to those that are being the most affected by these programs financially, like solar companies, organic farmers, nurseries, people within the medical establishment, and so on. Contact the Department of Environmental Quality or the EPA and demand, not ask, but demand answers and public acknowledgement. People in government work for us, and we as citizens of a free country, or at least what we would have called free at one time, should demand that we are informed on what is occurring and demand that it stops immediately. Turn your fear and frustration into something constructive instead of sitting on your hands or distracting yourself with superficial things. It is time. There is no more important thing to stand unified against than the chemtrail programs that are occurring so blatantly in our skies. You can choose the water you drink, you can choose the food you eat, but you cannot choose the air you and your loved ones breathe. Host documentary viewings in your home with the people you know, and then discuss with them ideas on what can be done, and then follow through on those ideas. Walk down the street and hand out flyers. Attend a city council meeting and openly discuss this. I know how scary it is to bring this topic up in a public forum because of the ridicule, but more people need to enact courage and be willing to discuss this openly. And quite frankly, I am far more terrified of the outcome of these programs than being judged by others. One voice will change nothing. I've tried, believe me. A few voices will change nothing. It takes large numbers to be heard and to enact change. And I am asking you today to join in voicing your concerns so that we may become large enough to really be heard. Because as of right now, we are all just conspiratorial voices dangling in the wind. And I am beyond ready for that to change. Thank you. And there's one last thing I would just like to say that I wrote on here, that a quote by the Irish philosopher Edmund Burke: all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. All right, Garrett's going to get it started for us. All right, Dane, so here we go. I've got a few of the same from the last time and some new ones for you.
No worries.
All right. What type of samples have been taken? Where have they been taken? And what have been the results?
A lot of samples have been taken of precipitation and even soils. But the soils, we stay away from those because once the precipitation hits the ground, it can be argued. So we have a good idea of what should be in precipitation and what should not, with some pretty specific limits. So in Northern California, we've taken about 70 plus snow and rain tests. The amount of metals in that from a baseline about 10 years ago of 7 parts per billion, which was already high for aluminum, that we've had single rain events escalate as much as 50,000% for the amount of aluminum in a single rain event at the 3,450 parts per billion. We've had snow tests off the side of Mount Shasta, which is considered a pristine water source. 61,000 parts per billion. That's about 61,000 times higher than we would expect, even with atmospheric contamination. Rain tests have been taken across the globe with similar results, but what we are seeing now is some of the major labs are changing their MDL, their minimum detection level. This appears to be an attempt to hide the contamination. Just like when Fukushima went off, they shut down all the West Coast monitoring for radiation and they raised the quote-unquote safe level. They just change reality to hide the issue. So now, the biggest lab in the country, National Labs, has an NDL, or a minimum detection level, that's 3,000% higher than the state lab I use. So you can see the dilemma we're starting to press up against. It's going to be harder and harder to get valid tests. But this being said, if anybody has litmus paper, which is easy to get and not expensive, if you test your rain pH, and that pH is higher than 5.6, you might find a pH of 6.6 or 6.8. You know there's metal in that rain. And so people don't know that that's not a small amount in that scale. When you have pHs that high, something is raising that pH, and it's aluminum in every test we've taken. So 1 point in that scale is a magnitude of 10, just like a Richter scale with earthquakes. So people can get a good idea if their rain is contaminated or not by simply taking a very, very inexpensive litmus test with the rain precipitation, and that will give them some idea.
Okay, this is kind of a follow-up to that question. What are the health impacts as well as the impacts to our environment from these substances? What are the respiratory implications?
Well, we can see respiratory implications because every other commercial is an asthma, COPD. We have respiratory mortality going off the charts in the U.S. from 2005 to 2010. Respiratory mortality went from 8th on the list of mortality to 3rd. We think it's in 2nd. Now the CDC is not admitting to that. So, respiratory mortality alone is huge, respiratory issues. Now let's add the more lethal ailments that are long-term, I should say. Alzheimer's, autism, ADD, ALS, obesity, type 2 diabetes, all have been linked conclusively to aluminum exposure. Now we have barium, which we know is an immune system suppressant. We have strontium that's shown up, copper. You start blending these metals together, again, you have synergistic toxicity. So individually, they're all very toxic. You blend them together, they're much more toxic yet. To the environment, these metals are bioavailable because they're in such small particulate form. That means everything is uptaking these particulates. According to Norwegian researchers we work with, they're seeing horizontal gene mutation in all plant life. It's changing soil pHs. Again, if the rain pH is high, it's going to affect the soil. Eventually it has. In Northern California, we see pH levels now in the forest. We have the baselines from USDA, so we're not shooting in the dark. They raised 12 times toward alkaline, 10 to 12 times. So it's affecting everything. And again, the particulate in the atmosphere shredding the ozone layer. We have massive UV now. In the case of UVB, 2,000%, up to 2,000% higher than we're being told. We're metering this ourselves, so it's quite a Pandora's box.
All right. I have suggested to the group here to start collecting samples and having them tested. What are the best things to collect for samples as far as the biological material, and what should they have them tested for? Are there other things other than barium, strontium, and aluminum that we should be testing for in samples like rainwater?
The tests can get expensive quite quickly, and again, now we have labs that are suspect, and we even had one lab that we know washed the test. They basically did not show the results because we sent a duplicate. They showed no detectable aluminum, no detectable barium. We sent a duplicate sample to another lab, and it was packed with metals. Now this lab, I don't think this was anything coming from up the ladder. It was simply a lab owner near an aircraft manufacturing plant. He did not want in the middle of it. He just simply scrubbed the test. So what I would argue is this: I'm not discouraging anybody from taking a rain test, and that's the only test I would take. I would not test soils because that could be argued. But test for the main elements, aluminum, barium. That way the test doesn't get too expensive. And beyond that, I would spend the time and effort on spreading the word at this point because we are very late in the game and very far in the curve, and I don't know how much time we have to really get this to light. I mean, a lot of things could happen and are happening quite quickly. So as opposed to building on the mountain of proof we already have, I would argue that our time is better spent in finding those that are not yet aware and waking them up.
Okay, thank you. Next question. To your knowledge, how long have these programs been occurring, and what evidence do you have of the initial programs?
We have documents from 1966, I found in the NASA archives, and we have patents going back to the late 40s. In fact, there's some patents that go back even further than that. Based on the presidential document I found in the NASA archives, 80 pages long, it showed clearly that these programs were on a quite large scale from probably the late 40s. And even by 1966, they had budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And people can look this up. If they Google 1966 government document geoengineering, they'll find it.
Not to interrupt you, but that document I actually have on that documents disc over there on the table. So the one he's referencing is available on the documents disc over there. Sorry, Dane, continue, please.
No worries. So, the scope and scale of this is going on above our heads is absolutely mind-numbing. But it's not hard to see how this happens because so many people, especially today, an example I often give, you could light the sky on fire and most people wouldn't notice it because they're on their iPad looking down. It's just they have no clue what's going on above them, and that's how this kind of stuff can happen and get this far down the road. But right now, again, I can't express the dire situation with our planet's life support systems and how fast they're unraveling. People need to truly investigate them. I'm not overblowing anything. We are at critical, and it's getting worse by the day. So I hope everybody continues their investigation.
Okay. Are you in contact with lab scientists or other scientific professionals from other countries that are reporting these programs that are testing to find what the fallout contains? If so, what has been found, and what are your thoughts on the reasons behind why these substances are being used?
Yes, I deal with researchers from Norway and Germany, and we have, of course, local people here. There's a Forest Service biologist I deal with and so forth. But the people in Norway found fluoride in 20 consecutive tests, precipitation tests. So and they eliminated all other potential sources for that metal in the industry. So in that case, they were certainly spraying fluoride as well. In the ice nucleating material, we're finding copper. This is from the nucleated snow that's falling all over the country that it's a endothermic reacting material. So at any given point, based on the weather conditions and what they're trying to accomplish, we can't possibly know all the materials that are being dispersed. But it's quite a witch's brew. This is at this point, I'm sorry, the echo's kind of getting to me in the background, but at this point there's so many metals coming down that the overall effect, we can't truly know. Again, with synergistic toxicity, we know in the case of mercury and aluminum, when those two metals are mixed together, toxicity increases as much as 10,000%. So I want to stress, it's not a little worse when all these metals are mixed, it's a lot worse.
Okay, we turned down the volume, hopefully that echo will subside a bit.
No worries.
Okay, we have a gentleman up here. What's your name, sir?
Michael, hey Damien, thanks a lot for all the work you do to check the site. Patrick, for a long time. Have you, in your global mission here, met anyone who's been successful working with orgonite or any other energetics, making cloud busters, chem busters, power busters, and the like?
I don't want to deter anybody from whatever they feel works for them. I have not seen anything to make me feel that we can put too much stock on that again, and I'm not trying to deter people from whatever they feel is in their benefit. And we actually built one on just to make sure that we were keeping an open mind. And it comes down to this: is that we have to stop this contamination. We have to, no matter what. Even if we had, for example, a way to chelate the body that is some way that we can all do it, we can still be faced with an environment that doesn't function and it no longer supports life. So I would say we should all try to maintain our health as we go, but at the same time focus all our efforts on stopping the contamination, because if we can't, nothing else will matter.
Okay, he has one more for you.
And one more question. Relating to geoengineering working in conjunction with HARP, I was just wondering as to what are kind of the latest progressions in that entire system. I know we're kind of focused on geoengineering, but it seems like that system works together as well, and I just wanted to kind of see what the latest and greatest is since your last video on your website, and thanks.
Thanks for your question, Mike. And certainly HARP is inseparable. It is part of the geoengineering. The jet stream configuration from yesterday was really unprecedented. We had tornadoes, which is not unusual, but the jet stream configuration was. It looked like an intestinal tract. I mean, it's something that has to be seen and really pondered if you're familiar with meteorology. I know the meteorologists are certainly wondering how this could be happening. So, yes, the HARP systems, in which there's an unknown number now around the globe. We think there's at least 26 large ground-based facilities and an unknown number of smaller RF towers. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. And so the degree to which they're manipulating the climate, the weather, is astounding. Anybody who looks up at their spraying, this is part of spreading these particulates out. We believe as they're polarized and they're hit with a certain RF frequency, they can scatter the particulates, make them spread all over the sky. Depending on the material, depending on the polarization, hit with the right RF frequency. In the case of fluoride, because these particulates can come together to form a larger condensation nucleus and thus cause precipitation. So they can migrate the rain across us on the west coast, which is exactly what they're doing. When they get it where they want it further east, they can cause precipitation to fall or continue to migrate depending on the frequency, depending on the particles they've spread.
Just a follow-up to that real quick, there might be some folks in here who are not familiar with the term HARP. I was wondering if you could give a very quick summary of what that means and what it is.
Yes. HARP, the acronym, stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. That doesn't mean much to anybody, and that's probably why they had such a confusing acronym. It's a ground-based radio frequency transmitter that transmits tremendous power to the ionosphere, as much as 3 billion watts in the case of HARP. So this causes an electrical chain reaction in the ionosphere. Based on indisputable data, even from the U.S. military, that can heat the ionosphere to tens of thousands of degrees Fahrenheit over hundreds of square miles. It causes a bulge in the atmosphere, a bulge in space. The stated purpose is to slow incoming ICBMs for defense purposes. But we know that when you put a bulge in space, creates a void underneath, you create low pressure zones, steer the jet stream. So this is the degree to which the climate system is being manipulated is absolutely staggering.
Okay, we have another audience question.
Hi, Dane. It's Judy Campbell from Bend, Oregon. We've spoken before. How's it going?
Hi, Judy. How are you?
Thanks. I'm well. Thanks for doing this as close as I could get at this time. Glad you're with us. I had two questions. The first one is about what people on the internet are referring to as chem bombs. My husband and I kind of disagree about a lot of the clouds we see come over Bend. I can tell these are not real clouds. They're iridescent, they're puffy, they're sometimes white, at certain times of day they're not white. When they cross over the sky, are these being shot off of ships in the northern Pacific? What's going on with these as opposed to what's being sprayed out of the back of planes?
There's a program called CARE. The acronym is CARE. It's called Chemical Aerosol Release Experiment. And that's part of what people are calling chem bombs. Now, that appears to be a part of the climate engineering, but not a primary part. And a lot of what you see drifting over are, in fact, aerosol clouds. You're correct. If you see a real cloud, a natural cloud, you will have no doubt it is a natural cloud. The clouds are quite clearly white, defined. We've almost forgotten because everything is so melted together. I mean, it's often we see our skies that are just a big blended mess of a few low-lying natural clouds that are almost melted into this overstory of aerosols. So a lot of this stuff blows in, and when you see the cobwebby-looking skies, the hazy skies, that's not stratospheric. This is absolutely aerosols drifting in from the coast, so it doesn't have to be dispersed right above your head. Also, this is important. There's much more to the spraying than just the horizon trails. When you see a short, bright trail that seems to dissipate, that is an aerosol disbursement, almost without exception, and that will start to make the sky more silvery white. You'll start to see these cobwebby clouds starting to form. With the high bypass turbofan engine, which is, you can see the tutorial on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. That engine, because 80% of the air that passes through that jet engine is non-combusted, except for the most extreme conditions, does not make a condensation trail. We know this because we have film footage. This is what the argument is. We have film footage now, a lot of it, of these aircraft spraying up close, shutting on and off, nozzles visible, into the argument. They're spraying. There's no condensation trail coming out of these jets at all. It's simply dispersed. You can see this on film, so anybody that doubts simply hasn't looked. But I would say the majority of what you're seeing, if it's not an absolutely clearly bright white, clearly defined cloud, it's an aerosol or a mix.
Let me just say real quick, the video he's referring to is also available on those discs over there. And second question?
The other question, maybe I could prompt something a little more hopeful. You hint or kind of give us a prelude sometimes on your website or Facebook about breakthroughs, about people who are whistleblowers who are going to step forward. Is there anything new and positive happening? There was something about stuff going on in Italy recently, people speaking up over there, but is there anything going on in the U.S. with high-level people really stepping forward? And thanks for everything you do, Dane. We all really appreciate it.
The same gratitude to everybody in attendance there. It's all of us pulling together that matters. Here's what I know. I was told that James Cameron has started a series out called The Years of Living Dangerously about the climate. I've seen the first episode. There's a number of parts to come. I'm told they're going to address geoengineering. I'm told they know about the issue. I hope that happens. I got a communication from family friends of James Cameron. They were a few days away from having dinner with the Camerons. They took all the data they could from me, and I assume that was passed on properly. They said he already knows. Whether it comes out or not, we'll have to see. Certainly this is the elephant in the room. The power structure will try to protect and hide to the last possible minute. So I hope something comes out of this series that's still ongoing. Only the first episode's been out. In Italy, yes, there are wheels turning there, and even just today I posted an article on Geoengineering Watch of the petition to force the 17 members of the EU to address this issue. And that's being pushed by some pretty credible groups. It's not just a citizens thing. I mean, there's a lot of people behind that. I'm communicating now, like I communicated several times today, with Rodolfo Rogazzini, He's the CEO of the Gaia Foundation. He carries a lot of weight. He's already got headlines in the Maltese papers about this about a week and a half ago. So I hope that that's continuing to go right now too. But again, you can keep in mind, even when fires start, there's a lot of pushback. But what's helping right now, although it's not a good thing, the weather's spinning out of control, and that's going to make it very, very hard to hide this much longer. As I mentioned on a number of other occasions, I had a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor of the Capitol 2 months ago. I know he knows, his aide knows, I've met with EPA people. These people certainly know, and they're not able to deny this. I mean, enough data has been presented. But will they show some moral fortitude? Time will tell.
Hey Dane, we need to change out our memory card really quick. We're recording this for a larger audience. Can you give us just a moment? All right, okay. Here we go. We've already touched a little bit on this, but how can we as individuals help to raise awareness of these programs? Many people have lost faith or are apathetic to our political system. Should we be contacting politicians, or should we be focusing our efforts elsewhere?
It's okay to contact politicians, and I think it's a good thing to let them know that you know these programs are going on and that you're keeping track of the fact that you mail certified letters so that they know that you're keeping a record, that you inform them of these programs. Beyond that, unless you get a particularly receptive response, which is doubtful, then you press on to the groups who would care if they knew. Ag groups, environmental groups, autism, Alzheimer's, and try to start as many spot fires as you can, because what this is going to come down to is when people realize that the ship is going down and that there is no lifeboat, and they better start screaming now or it's game over. We have to sow enough seeds so that even those who are too apathetic or lack the moral fortitude to engage the battle now, they will when they know they're going down with the ship. So it's imperative we get data in as many hands as we can, credible data. The flyers work really well for that. In fact, we have a good one on Geoengineering Watch you can download for free. Most know that, but you can make one as well. Just make it very credible. But that works really well for introducing people to the cause. If you have nothing to give them, and it's just an oral exchange, it doesn't get much traction usually. But if you start spot fires with credible data, we have also, you can email. This is very effective. People can do it from their home computer. The Flaming Arrows link on the front page of Geoengineering Watch is a prepackaged link with an intro letter. Of course, that can be modified or changed, but to start emailing that out in a coherent fashion to all those people, the journalists, again, all these types of groups I mentioned, start sending out the Flaming Arrows to wake people up. And the more spot fires we start, the more we stoke them, the more they merge together, the harder it's going to be to hide us. And again, the imploding climate system, and it is imploding. I assure you the coming weeks and months are going to get very interesting. And tomorrow, San Francisco is supposed to be the same temperature as Phoenix. So this should start to wake people up. And again, last year we had incidences of 100 degrees of snow in one day. It's getting bad, it's going to get worse fast. So this will also force people to wake up.
Hey Dane, it's Garrett. Somebody from the audience wanted to know,
Hi, Garrett.
Hi. Even though they're spraying and they're saying that they're trying to cool the planet, then why are they spraying when it is cold?
Well, it's because the temperature might be cool outside doesn't mean they don't want to make it colder. And they don't want to make a few records so that they can convince people there's global cooling, when the truth is anything but. And I encourage people to look at, if they Google, I have a GIS map on an article called Climate Engineering and Climate Lines. If you look at a GIS map, which is a map of all global temperatures, deviation from normal, you see a little area below normal in the eastern U.S., and the rest of the planet, with a couple of exceptions in Antarctica, is red, bright red. It's right now in Siberia, it's 80 degrees. Forest fires have been burning since early April. This is unheard of. It's 40 degrees above normal. To many places in the Arctic right now, it's a total meltdown. In our news, it's simply, like Weather Channel, everybody is trying to paint the picture of this frozen, ferocious winter. It is absolutely geoengineered. It is only here. It's not around the rest of the globe, and people need to start looking past the horizon, because I would encourage people who think it's cooling. The planet looks flat from wherever you're standing, but it's not flat. We need to stand back a little further. So Bottom line is they're trying to achieve records, they're trying to achieve headlines, they're trying to confuse people, they've confused a lot of people. But that's going to sort itself out pretty quick because the conditions we're going to face are absolutely horrific. So from the Arctic ice to the meltdown in Siberia right now, and there's a lot of things going on that are not being disclosed.
Okay, Dean, I know your main focus is on the weather data that surrounds this issue, but I was wondering if you knew about the Morgellons condition or the seemingly engineered cross-domain bacteria that is being leaked through Clifford Carnicom's work to the trails. And if you are aware of this, what are your thoughts?
I am aware. It is a big deal. If Clifford says it, I would put a lot of stock in it. He's a very meticulous man, and he's very careful about his research. So I have a lot of faith in Clifford. And the reason I don't go into it a lot is because I'm trying to get the majority of people to realize they are being sprayed like rats. And if I lead with the Morgellons issue, most people have never heard of it, they think it doesn't pertain to me, and they move on. So I try not to lead with that punch, if you will. But absolutely it appears to be directly related to spraying. In fact, we could never quantify how many things are directly related to spraying. When you saturate the planet with highly toxic and reactive metals, you virtually barely don't life apart. That's what we see. So Morgellons, yes, a big deal, appears to be connected to spraying, and I think that the fact that there's biological experimentation going on as well, I think it's pretty hard to doubt that at this point.
Okay, some researchers, such as suspicious observers, and some people may not know who that is. If you don't, he is somebody that you can find on YouTube. And a couple of others have spoken about how we are actually heading into an ice age instead of warming because the sun is decreasing its output. When reading these types of articles, geoengineering never seems to be considered as a factor. Personally, I have felt the hot stinging sun on my skin during the winter months. So for my own observation, this seems kind of implausible. As far as you can tell, is the sun decreasing its output? Could the ozone hole be causing the increase in temperature? And can you talk a bit more about this aspect?
Those are good questions. In regard to suspicious observer, I'm suspicious of suspicious observer, and I wrote an article with that title. And when you put out a 9-minute video talking about all the weather changes, and you never mention climate engineering, something's wrong. Something's very wrong. When you say the planet is cooling, when you can't back that up with any data at all other than fictitious data, something's wrong. And who would want us to think that the planet's cooling? Who would want that? Well, I posted a pie chart with actual verifiable data as to the various organizations, biggest one being ExxonMobil, that have funded nearly $8 billion, billion with a B, into 120 groups for the sole purpose of painting a picture of global cooling. Who would want that? So again, for this guy for suspicious observer to post a 9-minute video blaming all the weather situation on anything but climate engineering that we know to be the single greatest disruptive factor, something's very, very wrong. Let me give you a few fun facts on the climate. We've just passed the 38th consecutive year of above normal global temperatures, 346 months in a row. A lot of people seem to have forgotten what it was like in 2012 in the U.S. How short people's memories are. We shattered 50,000 high temperature records, 50,000 plus in the U.S. We had 362 all-time high records broken in the U.S. in 2012, hottest year ever recorded, and 0 record cold in 2012. So they switched into full-blown geoengineering mode, cooled off the eastern U.S. while we fried in the west. I mean, we're frying out here. It's 20 degrees above normal day and night almost constantly. We had 2 days below freezing over there. So, suspicious observer, everybody needs to investigate and don't, just because something looks believable, if it's one source, you have to look past that. You have to look to the broader horizon. Now also, Weather War 101. And a problem with him. He put out a video claiming that the moisture for storms is coming from cooling towers. He posted a picture that looks very impressive because there's a lot of steam coming out of some of the old cooling towers. And it looks like a big cloud forming overhead. It looks pretty impressive, but it's just steam. It's not going to mount anything. I've worked on cooling towers for Bechtel Power. You couldn't begin to put out anything out of a cooling tower for precipitation. You would need to be sitting on top of a massive lake and be able to pump all that moisture in the sky to do anything. The amount of rain that comes down in any significant rainstorm is so exponentially more massive than a cooling tower. So what I'm saying is, when you get these short little videos that look good, and maybe some parts are good. In fact, in the Weather Wars 101 video, he shows some X-rad images that are good, and they're valid. But you have to look for the whole of the ship. And claiming that all moisture from the storm is coming from cooling towers shoots the credibility. It shoots the credibility of our bonds if that sort of stuff is put out. It's a problem. So on the warming cooling aspect, again, I'm not a Gore fan, Gore a hypocritical criminal, and it's not about that, but it's about reality. And the climate engineering, certainly, there's no valid discussion of the climate period without talking about climate engineering first. Now, the sun is quiet right now, that is true, but it does not change the fact that it's getting much warmer, and the shredded ozone layer is the intense sun you feel on your face, and we have methane spewing into the atmosphere, so even though the sun's a bit calmer, it doesn't begin to offset the other factors. And let's use Venus for an example. Venus absorbs less solar energy than we do. Less thermal energy from the sun is absorbed to Venus' atmosphere than us. But Venus is 900 degrees from the surface, so obviously there's more factors, correct? If all conditions were equal, Venus would be about 25 degrees warmer than Earth. 25 degrees, that's it. Wouldn't be 900 degrees. So again, many more factors here that need to be looked at. But the planet is positively warming. Geoengineering, although it can create huge, cool areas temporarily, is actually fueling the warming overall. No question.
Okay. Can you discuss the data you've been collecting on the increase in UVB and UVC rays hitting the Earth, and what implications does this have?
Has huge implications. No ozone layer, no life on Earth. That simple. And there's a lot of downstream problems from the shredded ozone layer. So UV is measured in bands, in nanometer bands. At the top you have UVA, the most benign. Then you have UVB, UVC, then you have X-ray at the bottom. So we're told that no more than 5% of all incoming UV is UVB. No UVC and no X-ray. Now we know that we're getting at least 60% UVB, the more harmful band. 60%, that's a minimum 1,200% increase. Now, we are actually getting some UVC on the surface, the last band before X-ray. Now, we're told that UVC stops 100,000 feet up in the atmosphere, not anymore. So now with the UVB being so intense, it's burning the bark off of trees, it's causing trees to drop foliage, it's killing plankton. That's one of the biggest alarming effects. No plankton, no life on Earth. It's that simple. Plankton stocks are 50% down, 50. Plankton supplies 50 to 60% of Earth's oxygen content. Now, I'm not saying that the UV levels are the only source of plankton die-off, not at all. The warming oceans alone are causing that. But as the UV drops, you have much more thermal energy coming through. Even though the ambient temperature is down, you have this radiant energy coming through. Put your hand on the surface when you have a clear, sunny, bright, hot day. But even if the ambient temperature is not that hot, put your hand on a black surface. It's much warmer than it used to be. And we know this because we're seeing degradation. For example, some of the solar water heating panels are degrading 3 and 4 times faster than they used to from the UV. We know this. We're not guessing. So that's a lot of the heat you feel. The heat's building up. In spite of the fact that the sun's a bit calm, the heat's building up fast.
Last month, this is kind of follow-up to this. Last month in the beginning of March, here in the Dalles, we had over a foot of snow. And then the next day, or the following day, when the sun shone through, our mercury gauge in the backyard read 90 degrees. This, I'm assuming, is caused by the increase in these UV rays.
If it's exposed to direct rays, yes. I mean, I could drive that through the roof. And again, that's where you really see the UV. You can feel it on surfaces or when you stand in front of the sun. Even if the ambient temperature is not that hot, if you stand in the shade, walk in the sun, and it really hits you, that's what that is. And we know, again, we're not guessing. We're metering it. It's cut and dried. There's no question that the UV readings being put out by agencies are simply fictitious, period.
Okay, I got just a couple more questions for you, Dane.
No worries.
All right, here in the Columbia River Gorge, we are all witnessing rapid pine tree die-off, as well as other species of trees having limb die-off or drying out, mold and fungus all over the place. People here that I've spoken with personally just attribute this to beetles or the age of the tree. We've really not had drought like you have had in California. Can you explain how what we are witnessing in nature, like the trees dying, the mold and mildew fungus, all over everything, is tied to these programs?
Yes, it would be like, somebody having AIDS and dying of a particular ailment and blaming the death on that ailment and not the underlying cause, which was the AIDS. So in this case, we know, we're positive that we have bioavailable toxic metals coming down. We know in the case of aluminum what the effect of those metals is on organisms like trees, especially the conifers, because they sense the toxin and they shut down nutrient uptake. So they're dying a slow death anyway. Now let's add the intense UV, and that's a problem for the foliage. It causes trees to start dropping foliage. So you have a weakened organism, period, and now the beetles move in. So again, when the ray is as toxic as we know it is, we know the effect. We can't grow anything here in Shasta County for a garden. We used to have a 100-foot raised bed in my home. It was like a jungle. We can't go 10 feet now. I mean, the soil's almost sterilized. We see mutated plants in the forest now, commonly. So again, you have Forest Service people and other agencies, USDA, and their job is to tell you, when you can see with your own eyes that there's a problem, their job is to tell you it's not a problem, it's normal, go back to sleep. That's their job. And I imagine this, a week ago, actually 3 weeks ago, California Fish and Game acknowledged that they're seeing aluminum run down in waterways. About a week ago, I spoke to the water quality person attending the quote-unquote investigation, and she made it clear to me that they are not going to test the rain. Well, again, where the hell does runoff come from? And if you don't test the primary cause of runoff, how are you going to find anything? You can't find what you're not looking for. And this is the way the whole system is designed. So people should pay attention to their instincts, their sense of reason. These trees are dying. As really the greatest direct result is climate engineering and the toxic fallout, the shredded UV. This is the elephant in the room. We have to expose it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you asked about the fungus too. I apologize.
Yes, that's okay.
The fungus is what happens in the human body when you take antibiotics and you kill all the beneficial microorganisms. Fungus ensues, correct? Fungus takes over the human body in the same way. So as you drop this bioavailable metal, it is absolutely decimating beneficial microorganisms in the soils and elsewhere. So fungus has to ensue. And now we know with the species extinction rate of plant and animal, 200 plus a day, 70 to 80% of that is fungally related. So it's absolutely wreaking havoc in the biosphere. And this is also a direct result of climate engineering. So it's the greatest primary result.
Okay, last question for me, Dane. Can you speak to the subliminals in children's cartoons?
Well, that's pretty insidious, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, what kind of people would do that? And we have the website now we're working on. I think we need some help finding to work on that. And if anybody else wants to participate, we could use all the help we can get. But it's called Disinformation Directory. And when I say help, I just mean locating people who should be posted, maybe helping with the posts, just to shine a spotlight on the sort of despicable people who would participate in such incredibly insidious disinformation to tell kids that these toxic chemical clouds are not a problem. And I can't imagine how low society is stooped, but the people who participate in these things should absolutely be spotlighted, and they don't like that at all. And that's exactly what they deserve to have. So the Disinformation Directory website, which we're just putting together now, the purpose is to post people like this, post their official email contact, make very clear their part in helping to hide these crimes, and to encourage the public to email the hell out of them in order to let them know that we know what they're doing, and that we at some point hold them accountable when these programs are disclosed. So we need to take this approach also, because that way these people don't think that they can do this sort of thing with impunity just to get a paycheck.
And is there any names you could name on any of these cartoons, or anything else that you can think of that people might go home and look at to see for themselves that this is being done?
Over the hedge, cars, that's a couple. Like if you Google the subject, you'll find the images out there. If you Google chemtrails and kids cartoons, you'll see that. And again, for the passing on data, though, people write to congressional reps or so forth, use the term geoengineering. Do not use the term chemtrails. That's, as soon as you use that term, they'll send you back a boilerplate document from NASA that says it's all a hoax, and that's the end of the road. So use the right terms. And as far as people further up the ladder, the entire climate science community, for all practical purposes, is helping to hide the crimes of geoengineering. For example, Gavin Schmidt, probably the most well-known climate scientist at this point in the world from NASA, and he routinely lies. There's no other word for it. His job is to calm down the herd while the house is burning to the ground. Gavin has said that there's no methane problem in the Arctic. While we have satellite imagery of methane saturating the atmosphere, he says any problems with the warming is a half a century out. It's here now. These people, their job is to lie, quite simply. I was on the national radio show with Simon Donner from UC British Columbia. He's a very well-known climate scientist, and I brought this up before, but I mentioned the fact that we have films of spraying and so forth, and he responded with, well, I know it looks like they're spraying, but I know for sure they're not. Well, no, you can't say that scientifically. You simply can't. I mean, that sort of statement is completely fictitious, and when I tried to call him on that, and how could he possibly, as a scientist, make such a statement, I was off the air instantly. So this is what they do. No matter what you can see with your own eyes, their job is to tell you it isn't so. So people need to think and rely on their own sense of reason and be ready for a whole lot of lies, because that's what the system is designed to do.
All right, so we have another question there.
Sure.
Hi, this is Lamont Jones in Dalles, Oregon. With all these contaminants and chemicals falling, apparently there's no such thing as growing an organic garden anymore. And I just put one in. I'm just curious to know if there's if you know of any way, or is anybody doing anything about being able to cleanse the soil around your home to try to keep things organic? Thank you.
You are correct. Thanks for the question. You are absolutely correct. There is no organic at this point. This is why we hope that the organic community, or the anti-GMO community, joins the fight against climate engineering, because if we do not win the fight against climate engineering, nothing will matter. Not only will everything be poisoned beyond any recovery, the planet won't support life. We're on track for Venus syndrome right now. That's a fact. No matter what headlines people have seen and what they think the state of the climate is, it is imploding, and climate engineering is fueling that fire. So on the organic end, the only thing you can do that seems to have an effect, and this is something you can't do continuously, so it still comes back to us stopping climate engineering, there are soil microbes that seem to be fairly effective in decontaminating some of the metals, but that's a very, very expensive and tedious process, and if the metals are constantly being reintroduced, where do we stand? So it just simply comes back to, we have to deal with this battle. We have to expose the climate engineering. And even then, I stress to people, if we stop this, it's not like the challenges are over by any means. Irreparable damage has been done. We're past the tipping points, long past. We will not know the planet we have known. That's done. But if we stop the climate engineering, it's possible we can still preserve a planet that supports life. And I think that should be enough motivation for everybody to engage in the battle, I hope.
It's Norman Dalles. Is geoengineering part of the bigger plan to reduce the population on our planet?
That's a good question, and I don't think it's really possible to deny that at this point. Again, there's many layers to this onion, and part of the problem with the climate engineering, anti-climate engineering movement is a lot of people want to put it in this box or that box. It belongs in a lot of different boxes, and what you just brought up appears to be a part of that. Because we can say this for certain. We have Air Force studies from the late 90s that indicate they know exactly how lethal these particulates are that they're spraying. I mean, how could they not know? They're doing it, they're not disclosing it, and we have statements on the record by people like Rockefeller saying 95% of the population needs to go. We have about 35 countries around the globe right now descending into chaos because there's not enough resources, not enough food. Our media is not covering this. I mean, we have truly an unraveling situation that boils down to resources, and so why would we not expect the power structure to cool the earth? Why would we not expect that? So it's a very slow, insidious process, but we are being cold right now. Whatever a person wants to consider as the primary motive, that's an absolute fact. This stuff's coming down on us. It's killing us slowly. A lot of people have already succumbed. And there's no getting around that. That's a solid, absolute fact.
Another question, is the well water filtered enough to be safe?
Depends on the well. Now, these materials are highly reactive, so they tend to chelate quickly to other elements. That's why aluminum does not exist in the environment in free form. This is important to remember for everybody there. When you hear people who try to deny this issue, they'll say, well, aluminum's very abundant, we should expect it everywhere. Well, they're half right. Aluminum is abundant in the Earth's crust, but it is always bonded to other elements. It does not exist in the environment in free form. It certainly doesn't blow around everywhere, or we would have no life in the waterways and so forth already. So, because these elements are very reactive, if your well has any depth to it, a lot of these elements, at least so far, are chelating out. We just tested wells here where I'm at, and so far so good. Depends on how fast the recharge is to your well and how much strata that water is going through before it gets into the aquifer.
Do you know of a water filter that would take this crap out?
The only thing you can do effectively is to ozonate your water. There is no filter medium that will take these particulates out. They're far too small. If you ozonate, that is your best bet. And that's actually a very, very effective process and pretty reasonable to do. Just look up water ozonation for purification. And the ozone system basically oxidizes the metals so they fall to the bottom of the tank. And that's your best bet for purifying your water. Get an ozonator.
Thanks a lot.
Did anyone else have any questions for Dane before we let him go? Okay, we got one more.
Hi, Mark from Dalles. And I was just wondering, have you run into any politician that's given you any kind of positive feedback on what you've had to say to them and stuff, or are they all just basically saying go away?
We had Dean Heller. We had a letter from Dean Heller in Nevada that was the most straightforward acknowledgement of the programs we've had yet. I haven't seen anything other than that. My personal meetings have been in Barbara Boxer's office, Cal EPA, Cal Energy Commission, CARB, the California Air Resources Board. These people are bought, sold, paid for from the bottom up. Their goal is designed. They do it very well. I did have, again, with the Lieutenant Governor, he was cordial. I believe he does get this program that's going on. In fact, during the course of my meeting with him and presentation of data, he took a deep breath, sat back in his seat, and said, I didn't need this. And I believe he does get it. But that doesn't mean that anything's going to come of that. I don't know how far he's willing to go with it. It's certainly not just a career decision for somebody in his position to pursue this. It can be a life decision, if you understand. And we've had examples of this already when John Wheeler, former Bush aide outside of the Pentagon, when the birds fell out of the sky 3-4 years ago, according to witnesses, he said he was going to blow the whistle on these programs, and he was found in a landfill 2 days later. So this is the big league, and these people do not want this to come out, because as soon as the population knows, as soon as we reach critical mass of awareness, there will be a paradigm shift, because the population will not accept this. It will change everything. Now, the power structure is very dangerous at that point, and they're dangerous now, and I don't know when the next shoe is going to drop. They're certainly preparing. That's why they've ordered so much ammunition. For those that don't know in the audience, the U.S. government has ordered 2.2 billion rounds, billion with a B, a 40 caliber hollow point. They don't order that for target practice, so trouble's coming. You can bet on it. But the single greatest thing we can do is to expose climate engineering. If we can do that, it would be a quantum leap in the right direction. It would unite the U.S. population. They would all know that they're all expendable, that they're all cannon fodder for the power structure. So we need to reach that critical mass fast.
Anyone else? Looks like we've got all our questions answered, Dane.
Thank you guys. Thanks to everybody in the audience. Thanks for what you're doing. And it's all of us pulling together that matters.
Thank you so much, Dane, for your time and all your hard work. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for all of us here in the Dalles.
The same to all of you there. It's again, all of us together.
All right, Dane, thank you very much, and you have a nice evening.
You too.
All right, bye-bye. Bye. All right. So
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Sorry, I'm not the bearer of good news. I needed to share it, though, and I really appreciate that you all took the time to come and learn about this, and I hope that we can all find our courage and our voice to stand together and start speaking up, because if we don't, the consequences are far more dire than being judged by people that don't really know what's going on. So I ask that of all of you, for my son and for your children and grandchildren. Thank you. And also, feel free to take what is here. There's copies of all the documents and video clips that Dane talked about on these discs. There's tons and tons of other information on these discs if you want to research this further. My own personal rainwater sample analysis I had done last July that gives the signature fallout of what everybody's been finding. And his color flyers are Dane's donation. I have a huge stack, so if you want to take a bunch and hand them out to people you know, please do so. They're here for you. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.